Welcome to Educator.com. Today we're going to talk about samples and really about cases, variables, and measurements within samples. All right, so we need to talk about samples because statistics is all about data, and data is made up of cases, right? So each individual that is part of that data set is called a case. And cases are actually made up of variables. You could think of variables as different characteristics within a case. And a variable can take on different values, right? So just to give you an example, here's a data set that's really simple. We have three cases, right? Three shapes, right? And they have different variables. You could think of these almost as dimensions, right? So dimensions of shape, color, area, right? And so these variables right up here these can actually have different values. For instance, triangle is the value for this case, for this variable of shape. For this case, square is the value for the variable of shape. And circle is the value for the variable shape for this case, right? So a variable can take on different values. And because of that, it's called a variable because it could vary, right? Now, it doesn't have to vary. For instance, take a look at color right here. This is a variable that has all of the same values, teal, 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 right? And so although they don't have to, in a variable, the values don't have to vary, they can, right? So we could put a red case in there and it's okay. All right, one thing to note is that regardless of data sets, oftentimes you'll see cases listed in rows. So often each row is a case. Also, often each column is a variable. And you'll learn about different kinds of variables as we go on. So when you look at columns, you see variables. When you look at entire rows, you see cases. Not only that, but when you look at a cell is a combination of a particular row and a particular column. When you look at a cell, that cell often contains a value. So sort of next to cases, variables, and values, as a small note about where they might be in space, you might say usually in rows. This one is usually in columns. And values are usually in cells. Now, this doesn't always have to be the case, but usually by convention, many data sets are organized like this. So we could look here. Here, the cases seem to be made up of individuals. Here, the individuals are taken from Facebook. And the variables are things like gender, friends, siblings, and number of tagged photos. Now, tagged photos by itself is a variable. It could vary. There's lots of different values that it could hold. For instance, 24, 142, 21. So these are different values that could be sort of sitting in the place of the variable tagged photo. So just to give you one more example, here's an example of aircrafts. So these cases are aircrafts. And on each row, there's information for this particular aircraft on that row. The different variables here are number of seats, the cargo that it can carry in tons, and let's say average flying speed. So here we could see that the B747 has 410 seats as the value for the variable number of seats. And once again, it's organized rows being cases, columns being variables, and cells being values. Now, I want to introduce one other idea. Remember I said that variables can have different values. They don't have to differ, but they can. There are some characteristics that will not vary, though, because of the particular design of the study. For instance, maybe a study would like to look at pregnant women and how much prenatal exercise they do, and whether that predicts the health of their baby. Well, because of the design of this study, the gender, the variable gender, is actually not going to be a variable because there are very few men doing prenatal exercises because they're pregnant, right? Instead, this is what's going to be called a constant because the values are all the same by design.